Hello, hope you're having yourself an amazing day. It's yet another beautiful Wednesday evening. Is it evening? It's an evening on the 15th of May 2024, and this is the Black Hot Fire update. So I'll be telling you about each and everything that was hitting the headlines in Africa today. And talking about today, I've been in the studio for a while today. I was in East Show talking about redefining Africa. We had a very heated conversation with Keith on the formula that Africa should take in uniting. But anyways, right now we're gonna be talking about how Kenya is talking about needing 30 billion to repair damages that were done during the floods. And of course, you know who said that? It was Murkomen who said we need up to 30 billion to repair flood damaged infrastructure. We're also going to be looking at Switzerland, where a Swiss court convicted a former interior minister of Gambia for crimes against humanity. His name is Osman Sonko. So I'm going to be telling you about that. I'm going to be telling you about Nigeria with its protests. We talked about this yesterday. But apart from the protests, there was an attack in northern Nigeria on a northern Nigerian mosque that injured 24 people and most of them children. So Nigeria is still going through insecurity, going through economic woes, going through all type of problems. So we are going to be looking at that. Also going to be looking at Gabon, where former President Ali Bongo is on a hunger strike as we speak because he's allegedly being tortured in detention. And that is why he is going on hunger strike for what he called alleged acts of torture. So we're gonna be looking about that. We're gonna be looking at Tunisia, where a lot of problems have been happening in Tunisia too, with people protesting. People are protesting everywhere. If you keen enough to look in Tunisia, they are protesting for a fair presidential election. They are demanding for a date be set for a new fair presidential election. And for that, the government is not taking that lightly. It's arresting everybody who's having a similar view. With a Tunisian lawyer was actually arrested during a live news broadcast. I'm gonna be showing you that. So there has been growing criticism on restriction of free speech imposed under the presidency of Kais Saied. Kais Saied is the current president of Tunisia, who looks like he is not in a hurry to leave. That is why the people are out in the streets demanding for an election. And anybody who's demanding that is coming into the is seeing is coming into the is facing the wrath of Kais Saied, one of them being a lawyer who was actually arrested during a live news broadcast. He was having a live news broadcast and he was arrested by masked policemen. That is what is happening in Tunisia. They are not joking with anybody. So we're gonna be looking at all that, but let's start with Kenya, where apparently after the floods, we had floods over the past couple of weeks that led to the death of more than 200 people. The rains have ceased, not really ceased, but the intensity has uh, gone down. It's not as heavy as they were, so the floods are no longer there. However, after that, the government has now come out to say that it needs 30 billion Kenya shillings to repair flood damage infrastructure. Yep, 30 billion. So up to 30 billion is needed to rehabilitate critical infrastructure, including roads and bridges destroyed by the ravaging floods across the country. That is according to the Ministry of Roads and Transport. So he was speaking in Lamu during the assessment of a section of the Lamu Garsen Road. That was when the Transport Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen said that they have completed the assessment. Of course, I told you the first thing they are going to do after the floods are over is to set up a commission. So it looks like the commission that was set to investigate the floods is done investigating the floods, and the conclusion was 30 billion should be allocated to rehabilitate critical infrastructure, including roads and bridges that were damaged through the floods by the floods that were ravaging the country. So he said his ministry would soon begin discussions with Parliament to allocate the necessary funds. As a matter of immediacy, the country needs the 30 billion as a matter of immediacy for it to repair the damaged infrastructure. And you wonder why we never had the same immediacy when the floods were ravaging, why we never allocated the 30 billion to actually rescue people who are living in flood prone areas. If they had used the same energy, if they had actually had the same vigor that they are having right now repairing, which I know most of the repairs are gonna be ghost repairs, in as much as some damages happened on roads and on infrastructure. There's no way it equates to 30 billion. And sometimes I think people actually do not understand how much money a billion is. A billion is a lot of money. A billion is literally a million 1,000 times. 100 million, 200 million. I don't think people understand how big a billion is. For the government to demand that it requires now 30 billion to repair the infrastructure, to rehabilitate the roads and the infrastructure that was destroyed. But where was the same energy? Where was the same strength when the rains were here? Why didn't we see the government saying it needs this amount of money to actually help the people who would the death toll have been 200 plus if the government had acted in the same urgency that it is acting with right now, talking about wanting money to repair the roads? And of course, I can tell you what is going to happen. There's going to be an vetting process for, we're going to have contractors submit their bids, then we're going to have a vetting process, and then we're going to have one contractor being given the contract to rehabilitate the infrastructure. And this is what is going to happen. The contractor who is going to win the deal will be one of the politicians using a proxy firm. So probably if they're going to come together, create a mechanical engineering company if they already don't have one. Then the company is going to be allocated the tender to rehabilitate the roads. Then the company will be paid the 30 billion. Then because the damage was there, but the damage is not worth 30 billion. So they're going to do the repairs and they're going to pocket a huge chunk of money. That's Africa for you. I wanted to say that's Kenya for you, but that's literally Africa for you. Uh, we actually do reward corruption. We have been having a whole parliamentary sitting on a minister, a cabinet secretary. His name is Mithika Linturi. Mithika Linturi, for context's sake, is the minister who was the Minister of Agriculture. So he was in charge of the fake fertilizer scandal that I told you about the other day. The fake fertilizer scandal involved the government selling sand to farmers in pretense of it being fertilizer. So farmers bought fertilizer from the government, but it wasn't fertilizer, it was sand. They packed sand in sacks and sold it. So the minister who was in charge was Mithika Linturi. He was the one in charge of the agricultural docket. So there was a whole impeachment debate going on in parliament about whether he should be, the question was whether he should be impeached. And I know you know what happened. Mithika Linturi survived impeachment even after all the evidence that we saw of him being involved in a 5 billion fertilizer scandal. 5 billion was allocated for subsidized fertilizers. The money disappeared. And as if that was not enough, he still went ahead and charged farmers for the sand. He charged farmers for the sand. So there was a committee that was set, a commission, as Africa is always full of commissions. So a commission was set to investigate on the same. And after the commission of inquiry looked into whether Linturi was wrong in selling sand to farmers, they concluded that the allegations could not be substantiated. And they voted to clear Linturi of the allegations, and therefore the agricultural cabinet secretary Mithika Linturi survived an impeachment motion after the committee found allegations to be unsubstantiated. Even after the fertilizer was taken to the labs, the fertilizer was tested, and they confirmed that it was actually sand. They packed sand and sold it to farmers. So he was still not prosecuted. The report that was tabled by an 11-member selected committee said that they did not see enough reason to impeach. Stealing 5 billion from farmers and giving them sand was not enough reason for impeachment. So the chairman of the committee was called Wako. She's a lady, Marsabit women representative. Her name is Naomi Wako. So she said that, and I quote, majority of the members found that all the allegations against the CS could not be substantiated. So 7 members voted to clear him, and 4 members voted to have him impeached after stealing 5 billion. So this is what they said. They said we analyzed all the evidence that was submitted to this committee by all the parties and making findings in accordance with the requirements. We have concluded that the allegations could not be substantiated. The committee was dissolved, so that means the case is done. The motion had been brought about by an MP from Bumula who rightly so thought that stealing 5 billion was enough reason for you to be stealing 5 billion and selling sons to farmers was enough reason for you to go to jail. But apparently it's not enough reason for you to, because he was cleared of the same. So when we talk about corruption running deep and deep and deep in Africa, this is what it means. It means you can't steal 5 billion from people and nothing is gonna happen to you. The government is now demanding 30 billion to repair damages after the floods have passed. Nobody is compensating those who are affected. People are still getting evicted from what they are calling riparian lands that are flood prone. They are being evicted without compensation. But the government is more focused on repairing infrastructure, which, as I said, I do not believe for a minute that the damage on infrastructure was worth 30 billion. There is no way. But as we all know, that's the money that's going to be allocated. And all I can do is make noise and having more. Because at the end of the day, they are going to allocate the money is going to get looted. Tunisia is another African country serving us theatrics every day. So let me give you a little bit of context on what is happening in Tunisia. Tunisians, if that is what they are called, were out in the streets to demand a date for a fair presidential election. So the current president, his name is Kais Saied, is not having any of that, and that is why hundreds of protesters gathered in Tunisia's capital on Sunday and Monday to demand one, the release of imprisoned journalists, activists, and opposition figures, and the setting of a date for fair presidential election. So Tunisia is doing a Uganda. If you're against Kais Saied, you're going to jail. You either shut up or go to jail. It doesn't matter who you are. Journalists have been in prison, activists have been in prison, opposition figures have been in prison, with the latest person to be imprisoned being a lawyer who was in prison during a live TV interview. Here is a video of the same. So this journalist was arrested during a live TV broadcast. Yep, he was arrested during a live TV interview. So right now, if you go against what Kais Saied is saying, you're going to jail. And Tunisians have had enough of it. That's why they were in the streets to protest One, against the unlawful imprisonment of anybody who's going against the leadership of Said. And two, they want a new election date set. So they're doing a Senegal. Senegal did the same, went to the streets, demanded for an election. They got the election. And that is how Senegal is doing amazing at the moment. We were talking about the Senegalese president yesterday and how he has actually done a lot better than previous leaders. In the first few months, he has done a lot of reforms, including revising on the most of the deals that Senegal had signed with partners, including the fishing deal with the UK, the loans. So Tunisia is doing a Senegal. The people are out in the streets protesting, demanding for a new election. Uh, there is a whole economic and political crisis that is happening in Tunisia, same as many African countries. And Tunisian police, as I said, Tunisian police, as I showed you on the video, stormed the building of the deanship of lawyers on Saturday and arrested one of the lawyers. Her name is Sonia Dahmani, a lawyer known for her criticism of President Kais Saied. Two journalists were also arrested on the same day that I shared the video, on that same video. So the Election Commission said earlier that the election would be held on time, but with the president's first term, which lasts for 5 years, drawing to a close, it has not so far announced a date. So it's just saying we're going to have the election soon, but it is not giving out a date. Kais Saied took office following an election in 2019, but 2 years later seized additional powers when he shut down the elected parliament and moved to rule by a decree. He took power in 2019. 2 years later, he added power to himself when he shut down elected parliament and moved to rule by decree. He also assumed authority over the judiciary, uh, which the opposition said was a coup because he's now head of judiciary, he's the legislature, and he's the president. He's literally ruling Tunisia alone. So on That's why Tunisians are calling for a clean. They use the word clean political climate for a vote that would see an end to Said. If they have an election today and it's free and fair, then trust you me, Said is not winning anything. So they have been out in the streets trying to have what Senegal had, trying to force elections because the Electoral Commission is not specifying on when the elections are going to happen. And Said, without specifying to whom he was referring, accused some potential candidates of being traitors and seeking protection abroad. So he's not having any of this. He's telling Tunisians, you have me and there is nothing you can do about it. And that is why he's even so bold to a point that he's arresting people in live television broadcasts, plainclothes security officers entering TV stations and arresting people in broad daylight. So that's what is happening in Tunisia. Tunisia is doing a Uganda. It's almost like a Uganda is happening in Tunisia. Let's now head to Gabon, where former President Ali Bongo is on a hunger strike as we speak for what he's calling alleged torture. So former President Ali Bongo of Gabon and his two youngest sons, one is called Jalil and the other one is called Bilal, have started a hunger strike to protest the alleged acts of torture against family members. Their lawyers announced this yesterday, stating that a lawsuit has been filed in the Paris Judicial Court. So they say their aim is to have a French judge investigate these allegations, especially as Gabon's leader since the August 2023 coup, his name is General Brice Oligui Nguema, plans to visit Paris soon. So they went to report to their daddy in France that they're being mistreated and they are on a hunger strike now. So, an earlier complaint by Ali Bongo's wife, Sylvia Bongo, filed on September 1st, 2 days after the coup, was dismissed in October. And the new complaint alleges that illegal arrest, aggravated torture, and barbaric acts against Ali are being done in his detention. The lawyers are claiming that he has been tortured multiple times, and they're claiming that Sylvia has been beaten and forced to witness these acts. Wow, they are doing amazing. So Ali Bongo is under house arrest. He has been deprived from communication and is also being tortured. That is according to the lawyers. It is true he has been under house arrest ever since there was a coup in September last year, because he has been in power for the longest and the people of Gabon had actually had enough and they staged a coup. Now the government is under a different person. General Brice Oligui Nguema is the one who is at the top in Gabon and is going to be visiting Paris soon. That is why the lawyers ran to Paris to have the France government intervene, because they're claiming Ali Bongo is having it rough in the house arrest, which is a good thing if he actually is, considering the amount of suffering he caused on the people of Gabon. In other news, a Swiss court convicted a former interior minister of Gambia for crimes against humanity. He was convicted to 20 years imprisonment. His name is Osman Sonko. So Switzerland's top criminal court on Wednesday convicted former interior minister of Gambia for crimes against humanity over his role in repression committed by the West African country's security force under its longtime dictator. So he was given 20 years in prison. And Osman Sonko, Gambia's interior foreign minister from 2006 to 2016, he was under President Yahya Jammeh, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison on an international trial. He was being tried in Switzerland, despite the fact that he committed those crimes in Gambia. The trial, which began in January, was done on they're saying it was done in the international soil because it was a serious crime, and they felt that it was more likely they were more likely to get justice if it was done in another place other than Gambia. That was why the verdict, which was read out in Swiss Federal Criminal Court, convicted him to 20 years in prison for what they called crimes against humanity. He was accused of supporting, participating, and failing to stop attacks against opponents in Gambia and in the neighboring country, that is Senegal. So the crimes included killings, torture, rape, and other unlawful detentions, according to prosecutors. So that is why he's gonna have 20 years in prison, Osman Osman Sonko. So I told you he was under the leadership of Jammeh. Jammeh was the president. So Jammeh took control in 1994 after a coup, and he has been in power ever since up to until 2016, when he lost presidential elections but refused to concede defeat to the man who won, was called Adama Barrow. So he fled after regional military intervened and forced him out of power. So he fled. That is why today we had his minister being jailed for 20 years in a Swiss court for crimes against humanity. In Nigeria, they're having more problems, and that is another, looking at focusing on another region. I told you yesterday, Nigerians were out in the streets protesting because of the high cost. Everything is unbearably high in Nigeria, the cost of everything. Why? Because the government did away with subsidies on electricity. And since electricity drives economies, once you do away with with electricity subsidies, that is going to raise the price of everything. And Nigerians had enough, and they went to the streets to protest the same. They are demanding that the government reinstates subsidies on electricity. But Nigeria's economy is doing really, really poorly. I don't even think they have a choice. I don't think they can afford to pay the electricity subsidies anymore. I don't think they scrapped it because I know they scrapped it because they were not in a position to pay for it anymore. Nigeria, which is one of the most oil-rich countries in the world, the oil index reads 13. They say it's the 13th most. It is the 13th biggest producer of oil. I don't know if that's true. Is going through a tough economic turmoil, with the Nigerian naira doing poorly in comparison to other currencies. And of course, that's why people are out in the streets. They can't have it anymore. So yesterday they had more problems with a mosque being attacked in Nigeria's North District that led to a lot of damages, and so many children were affected by the same. So a man, it's said that a man attacked the mosque while they were praying on early Wednesday morning, resulting in an explosion. So it looks like it was a suicide bomber who entered the mosque and set up an explosion. The suspect, who is a 38-year-old resident of the area, confessed that he attacked the mosque. So it wasn't a suicide bomber, because if it was, he would be dead. He confessed that he attacked the mosque in Kano's remote Gadan village following a prolonged family disagreement. That is according to the police spokesperson. It doesn't make sense to me. So this comes after a lot of kidnappings that have been happening in Nigeria. We saw 260 something children being kidnapped the other day in Nigeria. So Nigeria is actually going through a tough period especially ever since the new president took power, Bola Tinubu. Everything is headed for the worst. But we pray for Nigerians, because that's all we can do. We hope they're going to gain their ground, especially on the security issues, because it's very tough there. Kidnappings every day, murders, attacks, and most of these wars take the religious angle. They use the religious division lines, the division between the Muslim and the Christians. That is why we having Boko Haram really doing a damage in Nigeria. They are taking the religious angle, which is a very dangerous angle for a war to take, because Africans take that personally. If you want to anger an African, try attacking their religion. So it's actually a very dangerous angle for a war to take, but unfortunately it's the angle that the war is taking. So basically that was everything that was happening throughout Africa today. Not a lot was happening. It was a day where we had a Swiss court convict former interior minister of Gambia for crimes against humanity, and his name is Osman Sonko. He was sentenced for 20 years for what they call crimes against humanity, including the crimes that he was accused of included rape, killings, and unlawful detentions. He's gonna spend the next 20 years in prison, but he was jailed on foreign soil on Switzerland. In Switzerland. In Nigeria, as I told you, we had a mosque being attacked, and other people are in the streets. So some are getting attacked in Kano, the others are in the streets protesting for the high cost of everything. Everything is unbearably high. That is why Nigerians are not having it anymore. It is also a day where uh, Gabon's former president Ali Bongo is still on a hunger strike against what he's calling alleged torture. He's saying he's being tortured in prison. He's under house arrest ever since there was a coup in August 2023. Now Gabon is under the leadership of General Brice Oligui Nguema. So ever since Brice Oligui Nguema took power, Ali Bongo has been under house arrest and is now claiming that he's being mistreated and tortured. So for that, he said he's not having any more food. He's on hunger strike, him and his two sons. So shout out to him. It's also a day where hundreds are also protesting in Tunisia to demand a date for fair presidential elections. They have had enough of President Kais Saied, who is just in his first term of power but has done a lot of damages to the people of Tunisia, including adding power to himself. He took over the judiciary, he took over the legislature. So he's a one-man government. There are no, I don't know, arms of the government. So he's the one in charge of the executive, he's the one in charge of the judiciary, and he's the one in charge of the legislature, that is the parliament. And Tunisians have actually had enough of him, and they're in the streets protesting against the same. They're trying to do a Senegal. As I said, Senegal did the same, and their efforts were successful because they were able to have a new president, and the old Macky Sall was retired. In Kenya, Murkomen, the transport CS, is claiming that the government needs 30 billion to repair flood damaged infrastructure. These are infrastructures that are damaged during the floods. So he says they need 30 billion in order to rehabilitate critical infrastructure, including roads and bridges that were damaged by the floods that hit the country a few weeks ago. So we all know where that is headed. It is headed, it reads a scandal coming up. That is all we had today. Not a lot was happening today, so I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And K. Williams is saying if anybody gave those puppets $30 billion, it will go to their bank account. And that is what I said. It is 100% true, K. Williams. Whatever you're saying is actually 100% true. They are going to create, they work through proxies. So they're going to have a vetting process. They are going to invite companies to quote. They're going to invite construction companies that are willing to rehabilitate the roads. And then one of them is going to create a mechanical engineering company and call it something. And then the company is going to win the tender. It's going to be given the 30 billion to rehabilitate the roads. And the money is never actually going to rehabilitate the roads because the damage is done. True damages were done, but they're not worth 30 billion. Doesn't even get to a billion. So the company is actually going to rehabilitate, to do a little touch up there for PR purposes. Then the rest of the money is going into their bank accounts. That's a fact. But what can we do? We can only make noise because trust me, in the next, this is going to be taken to the parliament next week, and they're going to approve it, and they're going to get the 30 billion that they need allegedly to rehabilitate the roads. So a big shout out to Kay Williams and a big shout out to General Mosquito who has joined me right now as I was just about to end. But don't worry, Joby is coming up in a bit. I'm sure she has a lot lined up for you today. I see her with the books. So she has a hot topic today. So I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day, General Mosquito K. Williams, and of course everybody who else was watching. I'll be here tomorrow. It's always a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen.